Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming in today. We are going to wait for about another minute or so, and we will get started. We have so far about 40, 50 participants, and the number is growing, which is great. This is happy Thursday to everyone. Now we jumped to 65, so the numbers are going up. Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Faye Cobb-Payton. I am one of the members of the ACM Educational Advisory, and co-chairing of the DEI committee with myself is my partner in crime. Susan, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Susan. We're just delighted that you all are here today.
Absolutely. And so today's webinar is on Power On. And the contributors, the authors are all here, Jean and Jane and all of the fellows. Just as a synopsis, this presentation will be on the book that follows the lives and experiences of 4 high school students from diverse backgrounds as they sort of contemplate and are confronted with the harm technology has done in their own community. The presenters will talk about in their book how the students have been and experienced an awakening of how technology can perpetuate racism and inequality. And we are looking forward to learning more and hearing more. So I will turn it over to you. And if you have questions, please put them in the, did we say the Q&A, Susan? Or in the chat?
They can just raise their hands and put them in the chat, whichever they prefer.
Whichever you prefer, and we'll be monitoring. All right, so turning it over to the team, the Power On team.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you for welcoming us to this wonderful space and community. I will share some slides with you all. And welcome. My name is Jean Ryoo, and today we'll be sharing about this graphic novel that I wrote with Ryoo Margolis, illustrated by a phenomenal artist, Karis JB, and for which we are creating resources for educators and students with fellow presenters, Shantae, Shayna, Lilybeth, as well as 3 other CSTA Equity Fellows. And Jane will get us started.
So thank you all very much for hosting us. We're really excited because we sent out our first social media tweet today about the book. The book's going to be out April 19th, and we're really excited. I'm just going to talk before Jean really goes on with the major part of the presentation about why we wrote a graphic novel and the backstory. Because everything has a backstory, right? So the backstory was that about a year ago, we got a call from MIT Press that has published Stuck in the Shallow End. And they said, did you ever think about writing a book for youth? And we were really excited about the idea. I went to Jean. I've been working with Jean for about 15 years in doing research about the underrepresentation in computer science. And we have, the last few years have been really focused on student voice and amplifying the voices, especially those students who have been traditionally marginalized in the field, students of color and females. And I went to Jean and I said, you know, this is the idea from MIT Press, and what do you think to write a book for youth? And she said, yes, absolutely. And then she said, let's do a graphic novel. And what I didn't know about Jean after working with her for 15 years is that she's an avid reader of manga and anime and graphic novels. So we just took off with that idea and decided that we were going to build on our recent research about amplifying student voice and with a foundation of prior research that we have been doing and that our community has been doing. So Jean, who's really the primary storyteller of the book, who really brought the story to life, is going to talk about our purpose in writing it and the ideas that we wanted to really highlight in the book.
Thanks, Jane, for getting us started. Yes, so why a graphic novel? Before we get into those details about the larger purpose and goals, we figured you'd want to know what the book's even about. And so we've made this little video trailer describing Power On. It reflects what has been a very collaborative process for the book. I wrote the script, Michelle Choi edited the video, and one of our research team members from the Mississippi Project, Takira Blunt, was the narrator. So I'm going to remove your earbuds so you can actually hear the video. And here we go.
Hi, my name's Taylor, and this is a graphic novel about me and my friends as we learned about the good and the bad of tech. What do I mean by that? Well, during the summer before high school, we found out that the technology we use every day and surrounds us wherever we live isn't always designed with our best interests in mind. Not only that, but the people who are at the tech design table, computer scientists who decide what tech we use and how we use it, don't always represent who we are and what we care about. Well, my friends and I decided that we wanted to change that. This story describes how Christine, Antonio, and John and I tried to learn about computer science so we could one day be at the design table. It describes the help and obstacles we experienced along the way and how we decided to make a difference in our community to get the education we want and deserve. And we might look like a bunch of drawn characters. Beautiful, I know. You can thank our illustrator, Karis JB, for that. But we're actually based on real people, real stories, real research. Read Power On and tell me what you think.
I hope you enjoyed that little teaser. Let's see if I can get this next slide going. There we go. All right. So in sharing the story of how this book came to be, we thought it'd be really important to begin with situating our effort in the larger sociocultural and political context in which we currently exist. Because when writing this book, we were thinking deeply about the challenging times that we are in and how our youth are growing up during an era of misinformation, political polarization, the rise of white supremacy, hate crimes, an increasingly threatened planet, climate change, and more. And while the field of computing has historically touted itself as neutral, apolitical, and objective, we can see how tech has actually played a very central role in recent events and how the lack of diversity in computing has had severe consequences, not only for marginalized communities, but also for the entire planet. And so we really think it's important that computer science and computing education speak directly to these issues. And most importantly, we need to support youth in making sense of the current tech-saturated world that we live in, that they are experiencing, while learning how to use their critical thinking skills to really have a seat at the design table, like the video talks about, in creating more just and positive tech advancements. And so one of the goals of this book was really to translate and share our current CS education research, as well as the incredible work of colleagues in the field. And so while reflecting on this current context that we live in, we felt the urgency of translating these ideas for youth and educators and families. Research findings, both our own and what many of you in our computing education community have been publishing, that shine a light on how the current ethical complexities of tech have arisen and why women and Black and Brown communities, Indigenous communities, people with disabilities, all those who are underrepresented in the field of computing are needed to help provide potential solutions to address these challenging times. So I pass to Jane to talk about our what we shared about from Stuck in the Shallow and in this graphic novel.
Yes, so thanks, Jean. So for instance, in the earlier research that we did is described in the Stuck in the Shallow End. We described the structural inequalities and the disparities in learning opportunities that fall along race and class lines, with students of color in low resource schools often having CS classes that only focused on the basic rudimentary skills and not this computational thinking and problem solving that really is CS. And we also witnessed the impact of biased belief systems about which students belong in CS and which do not. And the images of white and Asian males as the natural computer scientists, those who are born to do it, really dominate in this field. And so we felt that that the intersection between the structural inequalities and the biased belief systems needed to be examined. And that's what we really did in Stuck in the Shallow End. And what we found especially is that those biased belief systems about which students belong in the field end up creating such damage for so many students, especially students of color and females, and they're assumed to not have the ability and not have the interest, whereas it has really been preparatory privilege that gave those opportunities to so many students and was making others feel that they did not belong, adults and also the students themselves in the field. So then those larger policies in education like tracking and inadequate funding for schools really compound the problems of underrepresentation in computer science. And then there was pedagogy. Pedagogy is so important, and that students, a broader segment of students, find that the most engagement with computer science really is made when computer science is made relative to their lives. And this is true for all subjects. And so all of this research became part of the foundation of Power On. And in the next slide, I'm going to just show you an example of how we did this, of how we applied the research. And in this section of the story, Christine, one of the 4 friends, goes to her counselor because she really wants to take computer science, but she gets dismissed because the counselor said to Christine she was in the hospitality track and that she didn't really need computer science. And Christine was really discouraged about that because she and her 4 friends had said they were going to take computer science. And this incident, and this is an example of how we pulled from our research, because in Stuck in the Shallow End, we really heard from a Latina student who had wanted to take computer science, but her counselor insisted that she take floristry instead. And so these are the kinds of incidents and events that we heard in our research that we have incorporated into Power On.
Thanks, Jane. And in terms of our current research focused on student voices, many have described to us that they want to have a positive influence on the world around them, and that their engagement with computing increases when they see connections between computer science education and creating something really impactful. And while the world is becoming more aware of the ethical complexities of technology and how technology intersects with systems of inequality and racism, educators and students are rarely invited to share their experiences and really engage with these issues directly, which is why we wrote the graphic novel, because we think it's so important to translate the various research findings into formats that are really accessible and engaging for youth, educators, community members, since many of the things that our community writes and publishes tend to be in academic books and articles that are not readily accessible to the larger community. And we believe youth and adults will find inspiration in the efforts of our graphic novel characters whose perspectives and experience and actions are based on real students in our current research. So For example, when given the opportunity by their teachers or after-school educators and leaders, in the graphic novel, different characters work on and describe the computing projects that they are creating to share their perspectives, fight for positive social change, and improve the quality of life for both themselves and their communities. And this includes e-textiles projects. The one in the book is inspired by students who are involved in our Student Voice Research Project, an app focused on wellness and ways to de-stress. Again, youth from our project who shared that project with us. And really thinking about ways that computing can amplify student voices and experiences. So when thinking about the key topics of underrepresentation, social responsibility, youth agency, and more that come up in this book, we really felt like it was important. And this list is actually one that we came up with not only as we were writing the book, but also reflecting on the value of the book for educators and learners. And so the issues that are raised in Power On include why CS for all matters for students, why underrepresentation matters and its impact, what is bias, and what does that actually look like in computing and in particular in AI? How do stereotypes in the world affect the lives of our students and who does CS? The importance of identity, names, and belonging, and students' cultural identities in relation to computing. Who are our CS heroes, past and present, who represent the diversity of who we are in the world? Thinking about how to be an ally and step up for people who are not necessarily like you, and get involved in good trouble, right? Who is making good trouble in our communities and why? We also raise the issue of, do students feel that their voices are being heard, and do they have a sense of agency? And how can they take charge? So also thinking about who takes computer science in our schools, why and why not do we have access? And how is this tied to larger issues in the school and also in our broader communities and society? And also, of course, the topic of how can technology do both good and harm? So this is really explored through the lives of the characters, obviously, since it's a graphic novel. And so here we've been thinking about how stereotypes have impacted other fields and the characters' own lives as the friends kind of discuss what they've seen and noticed in their own lives and when they're thinking about computer science and who has had access to it, and other fields like medicine, swimming, as is described in Stuck in the Shallow End. And also, in the book, we were really seeking to counter stereotypes about what computer science involves through pages like these that highlight what computer science looks like when applied to all sorts of fields and professions. But again, we see this effort not as just, researchers or writers in their little worlds, but really this broader collaborative and community-focused effort. And so throughout our writing process, we not only wanted to engage with these research ideas, but also continue building on our research practice partnership relationships and seek direct input and feedback from a youth advisory council, as well as expert adult advisors. So youth from our current project, as well as from collaborators' classrooms and colleagues who really served as wonderful critical friends, were invited to review various versions of the book along the way. And we found their input to be incredibly helpful on a number of levels, but for one example here, when thinking about ways to make the personal stories of the characters come to life, the majority of youth advisors shared how important it was for them to know more about the personalities, the experiences, the everyday lives of main characters, right? It's funny because in the very first draft of this book, it was kind of written almost like an outline, and it was probably like an 8-page document. And students were kind of like, great, but wait, what is this story? Who are these people? Why should we care about them? And then I finally educated myself on how graphic novel scripts are actually written. And they're like movie scripts, right? There's all of the description, like recognizing, oh, we need to describe the hand gestures, the facial expressions, what is really going on in the feelings, and then put that to life in words. And so we really built that into the book, building onto the experiences of the 4 friends in the book here. And in line with this ethos of collaboration and community, today we are working closely with Computer Science Teachers Association Equity Fellows to develop educator resources for the graphic novel. And we want to ensure that Power On serves as a useful tool toward facilitating discussions about the various topics that we mentioned earlier. We know that educators, both in and out of school, often notice and understand the complexities of the ethical dimensions of computing or the problems with inequitable access and underrepresentation in the field. But they may not always feel supported in addressing these issues in their educational spaces or feel like they have tools to be able to talk about it. And so with our brilliant Equity Fellow collaborators, some of whom are here with us today, we have this opportunity to provide the tools and supports that teachers currently lack to be able to tease apart these important issues with youth. And so our amazing collaborators include in alphabetical order by last name: Megan Bowen, Sarah Sirus, Shantae Costan, Shayna Glass, Lilybeth Mora, and Elizabeth Name. And today we have Shantae, Shayna, and Lilybeth here to present with us, which we're very excited about. And Megan, Sarah, and Elizabeth will join us for future presentations, so stay tuned. And so now I wanted to turn to our collaborators to speak.
Can we pause for a second right here? We have,
sure.
Before the collaborators, we have raised hands and we have some questions in the chat, right?
Thanks for keeping track of that.
Yeah, so one question, this has come up, I think, twice. One question is, what is the difference between novel and a graphic novel?
Great question. Yes. So I would say, and I'm no literature professor, but I would say a novel generally doesn't have visuals embedded in it, although I think that there's some interesting writers who are trying to change that and kind of push the limits of what a printed novel looks like. But usually a novel is written all text chapters, and the description of facial expression, emotions, inner narrative, etc., are all written out. A graphic novel, on the other hand, is the things like the facial expressions, the emotions are very much described through the drawings themselves, the colors, the texture, the gestures of the characters in combination with just dialogue. And sometimes there might be like other aspects, descriptive aspects in graphic novels as well, sort of like setting the stage or like the date or what's going on in someone's head that's not in the dialogue.
Jean, can I respond to that question too?
Yes, please.
So graphic novels definitely pack a lot of meaning using few words, and it utilizes illustration to support the storytelling process. And it also, what graphic novels do is they widen the parameters of learning by engaging reluctant readers. Like me, I was a reluctant reader as a child. And so adding images really supported my process of wanting to even look at it at all. And that process, when you get them started, it helps develop those literacy skills by allowing them to engage so that they can have an opportunity to comprehend what they read and then also build vocabulary.
Okay, so we're gonna try to get through these a little quickly. So, and then Susan, I'm gonna ask if there are others that I missed. The question has come up from several participants that are on the Zoom webinar. Is there a study guide to go with the book, and how can people get their hands on the resources associated with Power On?
It's a great question. And that's what we're going to dive into in the next part with Shayna, Shantae, and Lily. So yes, okay. We're in the process of developing a study guide and resources that will be freely available online around the time of the release of the book.
Okay, all right. So that answers a number of questions. The last one before we go to the next part of the presentation. What is your targeted audience and distribution method to reach the audience?
Great question.
I can answer that. I think when Lily said reluctant readers, that is one part of our target audience. We are really determined to get this book distributed as widely as possible to youth and to educators, especially into schools that are under-resourced and with high numbers of kids of color. And our target audience are those youth and educators, and not just in computer science. This is for middle school. We wrote the book for middle school and high school students, but we believe that any adults interested in it is part of our target audience also, and also all educators. And obviously we wrote it for computer science and to help support all of the issues about underrepresentation in computer science. But as it has been told us, this would be a great book for English classes. This would be a great book for government classes because it raises all of the issues about power in computer science. And so our audience is pretty broad. It's really, we are committed to youth. And we are doing a lot, which I'm going to talk about at the end slide, about how we feel this is going to take a village to accomplish this. And I'll talk about that later.
Okay. And so just as a last point, just so you know, there was a question from the audience about ways to make it even more accessible to elementary school students. And Susan, did we have anything else?
Yes, we have one. Hejong Lee has a question. Hejong, please go ahead.
No.
Maybe we'll come back to that.
Any others? Okay.
Shantae, you've raised your hand. Is there something?
No?
you wanted to
Okay.
add?
All right. We will move forward. Next part of the presentation.
Okay.
Back to
great.
you. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's see. Oh, and also I saw a question about doing metrics on the impact of using this resource. We haven't, we have been thinking about doing research around its implementation, but we haven't fleshed out those details yet. So if there's anyone willing and interested in working on that with us, please reach out. And then also, I wanted to share something else. I forgot. I'll get back to it. So we wanted to hear directly from our collaborators around these two kind of reflection questions, which we thought might be useful to think about with the audience. And the first being what you all as educators and folks who work very closely with school teachers and students and families, what do you see as a value or purpose of using the graphic novel in computing education contexts or otherwise?
That's a call for participation at this point.
Oh, it's a call for Shayna, Shantae, and Lily will be sharing their reflections. Right. Thanks, Faye.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so I'll go first. So I really feel like the value of this graphic novel for teachers is to show students what they have the power to do. First and foremost, I feel like the book is the different chapters are going to show them that what they're learning in their classes, whether it be computer science, well, let's aim first at the computer science classes, is not just what happens here, but what their impact is. So with their impact, not only on their campus, in their community, right, in their households, how far it can take them just from what these students in the novel, the graphic novel, are going through, experiencing, and producing. So when teachers can show the relevance to what I'm teaching you, the sky's the limit. Reading this, they can see themselves through that.
Shantae, do you want to share next, or Lily?
Yes, so I'll go next. I'm excited, like what Shayna was saying on the student side, but definitely on the educator side too, because you know, sometimes educators struggle to find things of purpose with computer science. Also, you know, how it connects to society, and sometimes you know, there may be a disconnect based upon our own implicit biases that we have in our own perspectives, in our own backgrounds, that we may not be able to expose our kids to everything. So this is a really great way to do that, and kind of have us as educators reflect too on computer science and technology. So I'm excited for that piece, because I'm always, you know, speaking to other educators, like, you know, what can you do for yourself to be better in order to help our students out? So for me, it's that the educator side of it too, is, you know, helping our fellow educators in promoting CS and the different aspects of it.
I also think that this graphic novel tackles really uncharted territory in the graphic novel universe. I don't know of any graphic novel series that is a social justice related to computer science and computer science education. I also feel that there's high value in the beauty of this product, because it really exemplifies how computer science can be integrated across all curriculum. And so I'm really excited, like my colleagues here, about the potential impact it can have on really addressing equity and inclusion in computer science, period.
That's awesome. Thank you all for sharing. And can we also hear from you, Shayna, Shantae, and Lily, in whatever order you want, but what are the issues that you're most excited for learners and educators to be discussing with the graphic novel as a tool?
Okay,
Oh, go ahead. You can go first, Shantae.
Okay, I'm super excited. So my biggest thing is the biggest issue for me is the algorithms, the racial bias in the AI and in computer science. To me, that's a huge impact, especially with the population of students I work with, and for them to understand that there's things that are already embedded that you need to be aware of. And sometimes they don't see it that way. So for me, the most excited about is that aspect, and also different careers that you can have in computer science, because the school I am, we actually have career tech education. And, you know, I have students that, you know, want to be in nursing. And I'm like, well, you know, you can use computer science in nursing, or auto tech, or, you know, cosmetology, or any other aspects of it. So for them, just, you know, computer science and how it incorporates into other career fields. So that's the biggest thing I'm excited about for my learners.
Something I'm excited about, because I'm with Shantae, just with all of my colleagues. The one thing that we discussed before is good trouble. It stands out to me. Understanding who's making good trouble. Also about them understanding how to be an ally for those who may not look like them. I think now, currently in society, students, they need to see and hear that more, and be that more. Like they need to know that they have ownership in that, and also being heard. Do they feel like their voices are being heard? Do they understand that sense of agency? Recognizing them as themselves, as that superhero that they are, that they do own that superpower. This book resonates with all of that. So it's time for them to be and have and own good trouble. I'm ready for it. Oh, and looking back on all of the people who are currently making good trouble, as they are included in the book as well.
I echo Shayna's thoughts. I really believe that this graphic novel is empowering, and that it provides students an opportunity to see it in, you know, visually, and read about how you can activate your voice. You can really tap into that agency and even like that self-efficacy because of them digging into, they want to make change, and that they weren't just going to just read about it and move on with their lives, that they were really proactive and getting the community to get involved in improving computer science access. What I also really like, the issue or something that's addressed in this graphic novel, is how it exposes and sheds light on current CS champions and present day champions, and then how it shows us how the students themselves can also be those heroes. And so we can't wait for you all to read this.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I should have said spoiler alert before we started the presentation, but yes.
So I had just a quick question. Is it possible for the educators to give the audience an idea of the schools that they're in, parts of the country, student body that they're teaching? I think that would help to glean some context here for the responses.
Great idea, thank you.
I'll go first. So Shantae Costan, I am a computer science teacher in East Cleveland City Schools. I'm in Shaw High School in Ohio. And right now we are in a state takeover, and we are the poorest, our district is in the poorest city in the state of Ohio. And we are also, I believe, #2 poorest city in the nation. So in our demographics are 98% African-American.
So I'm Shayna Glass. I'm located in Houston, Texas. I formerly worked in Aldine Independent School District in Houston, Texas, which is one of the largest 100% Title I districts in the country, where just about all of our students are brown and Black students, so all of our students are children of color. And there's 65,000 students in the district. So yeah, currently a professional learning manager with CSTA, still supporting and uplifting Equity Fellows and Equity alum, as an Equity alum.
Okay.
So I'm located in Northern California, in Vallejo, in the Bay Area. It's about 12,000 students. 90% of them are students of color, and over 50% are economically disadvantaged. And we have some major CS access issues. California, it's not a requirement yet, but also we don't offer courses. We have standalone courses, but there's a lack of integration of CS in K-12. So that is something we are tackling, and that we're hoping too that students can also be a part of the process of making sure that we change that.
Thank you so much for sharing. And thanks, Faye, for asking that important question.
Okay.
I think we also wanted to reflect on potential use for the book in relation to what educators are thinking about often as they lesson plan and are in the classroom. And that's thinking about standards alignment and the goals that we have as educators in the classroom. So Shantae and Shayna, did you want to speak a little bit to how you see these ideas supporting learning in the classroom?
Well, I can speak I do teach the AP principles course here. And when I read the novel, I immediately thought about the impacts of computing section for computer science and for the exam, because that's a big standard that we have to learn about. So, the good, the bad, the ugly of computer science and tech and, apps and innovation. So for me, that was the biggest, standard that I pulled out of it, but also for my foundation, of course, just human interaction, and just, just learning about people and having more of a global perspective. So that for me, the biggest standard for me is that impact of computing and AP computer science and how I can relate all those standards, within this book. And to me, it'd be an easier read, especially for my students, to really understand the impact of computing.
To piggyback off of what Shantae was sharing, we want to make sure that teachers can see the correlation between the CSTA student and teacher standards. We want to make sure that they can see how they also can grow professionally from this, and how they can support students, as it'll be a direct correlation to the student standards, and how it will show through the ISTE standards as well. To expand just like 30 seconds, it's important for teachers to be able to take that back to their administrators. We know that this book may, in certain parts of the country, be controversial, so it's going to be important to show the alignment and support it with data on how this can be useful for all. Like Jean and Jane were saying, it's important to see this doesn't just have to lie within this one content area, and showing those connections in both using the CSTA and ISTE standards will give teachers that power, and administrators, depending on the level in which this book may have to go, so that it is inclusive for all.
Well, thank you for that. And since folks are interested in the educator resources, we thought we'd share a little bit about some of the ideas we have so far. So Lily, Shayna, and Shantae, did you want to share? We've been meeting regularly to start fleshing these out.
Right. So we understand that this can be really uncomfortable. Like the topics that are discussed in the novel might be something that you may not have like intentionally had conversations with your students. We are currently working on providing an equity guide for educators, for things for them to consider, and even some additional resources if they wanted to better understand the context of what's discussed in the novel. In that, we would include a teacher advocacy kit, and we intend on having like a very light version depending on how much time you have to be able to spend on preparing yourself for introducing or implementing the graphic novel in your class. And then even maybe a longer version if you wanted to really dive deeper in better understanding your identity, understanding the social construct of race, and even the cycle of oppression. All these things we want you to be able to have the opportunity to learn more about, so that you can learn how to minimize the harm in even simply having conversations. And also, if we have time to, we're going to include a student advocacy kit so that you can prepare your students for what they're about to dive into. Also, so that you can set really distinct norms so that everybody's practicing inclusion in their conversation.
Excuse me. So lesson plans, we're working on the lesson plans. So right now it's, going through each of the chapters, coming up, pulling out the, vocabulary terms. So we'll have a glossary of terms for it also, and not just, CS terms, but also some cultural terms as well that I thought was very important, and some new words that I've learned from, like they talk about different foods at one point, and I said, oh, I think that's something we should write there, because I think that's an important aspect as well. And, just some discussion questions, also extension activities. So in the novel, they do mention articles in different topics and, and different people, and creating extension activities and extension questions. And here's a link to this article. Let's talk about this article, do a deeper dive. If you are the kind of teacher that has a diverse class, and maybe you have kids that want to be challenged a little more, you can give them those extension activities or have everybody do it. So those are actual part of the lesson plans, as well as, your basic activities that everybody can do, but you can also have those, extended activities for even deeper conversation. Once you go through, the advocacy kit and, get the norm set up, because some of those articles are intense, but they're definitely something worth reading about, and they definitely relate back to the book. So the lesson plans we're working on, and they're definitely going to be helpful and guide you through the book.
Thank you so much. And I know that we only have a little over 10 minutes left. And so I think, Shayna, did you want to share anything before I move on to the next? Okay, thank you. So we thought we'd end with some reflections on, it's been a grand adventure writing the book, and we're super excited about creating these resources. There's still a lot moving forward. As Jane said, it's going to take a village. So I'm going to turn to Jane to talk about our next steps and the challenges ahead. And we hope that you join us in supporting this effort.
So I just want to thank the CSTA Equity Fellows, all of you. I mean, we could not do this without you, and we cannot do it without the CSTA, the CS community. So there was a question in the chat about how we're going to distribute the book. And Jean and I right now are really leaning into this challenge. Our mission is to get it into the hands of youth, as we've said before, and this is going to be in schools and also in after-school programs. So like Boys and Girls Clubs, Girl Scouts, all of the informal learning, and the main focus is being on the schools. And so we are doing a big campaign of talking to donors, industry, as well as nonprofits, to try to get money and grants that could, like, let's say a company would adopt a certain school district and would commit to buying so many books to get it in the hands of every middle and high school kid that could in their local district. Someone put in the chat, what about grants for purchasing the book? I think that's a great idea. We've been thinking about Donors Choose. We've been thinking about all of the different ways that I know that MIT Press has did a whole bulk ordering so that the price of the book can go way down if lots of books are purchased in a school. So we want to get school district leaders to understand about the book. So we're hitting this on all different levels of within the educational community, and really leaning, this is a big challenge. It's going to take a village. We need all of everybody's ideas, anyone who wants to participate. We're trying to do some YouTube. Someone had another question about transmedia. We're trying to get YouTube, okay, I'm going to dream big here, but Jean's going to say, Jane, don't say that. But someone mentioned, maybe like a Netflix series, because, the world of technology is changing so much. And we want to be able to keep up with the issues and have this be a series for kids. So any of your ideas, we're really leaning in to try to get philanthropy to step up and get these books into the hands of kids. So
yeah, if anyone has connections they think we should be talking to, or knows how to get in touch with Oprah, let us know.
So yeah, you had some good questions in the chat. So thanks for answering those. Thanks for answering those in your response. And there was also a doctoral student here who's studying computer science that wants to connect with the group. So that was the only other outstanding one that I saw thus far. And you had a couple of comments as well around, comics are complex text, and there's a very interesting link. So we want to thank the attendee for putting that in as well. All right, so keep going. We have a few minutes. We have about, 5 to 6 minutes.
Yeah, Shayna noticed there's a question too about the book's accessibility for students with disabilities. And we know that youth with disabilities, it's a huge range, you know, for folks who have disabilities. So I may not be able to speak to that diversity, but we've been thinking about having the book evaluated for like grade level reading level. And I think with that goes hand in hand, thinking about like, what are ways to make the vocabulary and language more accessible for different folks? Also thinking about language learners, English language learners, and also, you know, we also highlight a couple of computer scientists with disabilities in the book. We think that's really important for youth with disabilities to see themselves represented there as well. But that's a great question. If other people have ideas, please feel free to connect with us. I should put this, there we go.
And you have a question here. Have you created a connection to the NSF BPC requirement?
Connection with NSF BPC.
Our work has been funded by a lot of the NSF BBC CS for All grants. I mean, the NSF has been our community, all the projects that have come off of the NSF. So we consider all of those broadening participation in computing and CS for All projects to be the village that we hope will be co-owners of this book and promoters of the book. Yeah.
So you had, I think this is a very interesting question. There's a question in the chat that says, what do you expect power to change in terms of the mindset of CS teachers? Because that seems to be actually the weak link here to this particular attendee. How do you expect to get that mindset change?
We actually think that this graphic novel would be really useful in professional development, specifically around DEI issues and thinking about underrepresentation in the classroom. And so we've been talking with CSTA about what that might look like, as well as other potential collaborators. And what we decided is to focus first on educator resources for students, focused on student learning first, but very much want to create professional development resources for educators as well. Already in the Exploring Computer Science professional developments, Joanna Good and Gail Chapman have been sharing Stuck in the Shallow End with educators, which has been a really powerful way to start thinking about institutional racism and sexism and these issues that come to light in computing and especially in computer science education, which I think is a phenomenal way to support shifts in educators' thinking. And we think that the graphic novel could be useful for that as well. It's definitely a much faster read than a full research book, right? So we could see that as being useful.
There are lots of good questions. I'm going to refrain from asking mine because we have another one. Translation into Spanish Mandarin?
Yes, let's ask MIT Press. Yeah, no, definitely. Okay. I have many Spanish speaking friends who are like, when is this going to be in Spanish? And I was like, we're just trying to get the first version out first. But I think that, you know, the more people who want it, the better. I mean, I'm really excited to ask MIT Press those questions myself.
All right, here's another one. Oh, go ahead, please.
We have a question in the audience. I'm going to turn on Hejong Lee's mic.
Thanks, Susan.
Sure. Please go ahead. You're muted, Hejong. Okay, maybe we should just move along.
Okay, all right, next question. Let's see, the question came up as a part of that mindset change. Have you thought about the assessment portion? Because Stephen at least brings that up as someone else did also in the chat. So you might want to take a look at that. But in terms of thinking, how do you measure, how do you assess mindset and shifts?
Well, I can take a stab at that. One of the things we've been thinking about is a research agenda for when the book is in the classrooms. And we've thought of how could we get teachers to help, like maybe videotape discussions that are going on within the classroom, and then sort of have collaborations with teachers to analyze the data, to have possibly to have surveys of students on how they feel the book changed their mindset, on which issues that they've changed their mindset. So it's all different ways of that we want to think about how we can assess the impact. And I really do believe that changing the mindset of teachers, we're going to really rely on our teacher colleagues and CSTA, because, you know, there has been a, you know, some feeling that these are the issues that, you know, would be more apt to be talked about in a government class or a civics class, or, you know, not necessarily in computer science. And we really feel that these issues of social responsibility, racial bias, and AI, all of these issues about ethics and computer science, about underrepresentation, belong strongly in the field of computer science for the next generations. For this generation, it's really critical that people be talking about the goods and the harms of technology. And so the mindset of our teacher educator community is also something that we really want to be monitoring around their reactions to the book, and surveys, interviews, etc.
Okay.
I just want to add, sorry. Oh,
Yeah, I was going to say, we kind of running short on time. I know that,
Oh, okay.
so this is to Stephen. Stephen, I knew that your comment was a comment and not a question, but that was one of the questions that Susan and we had brainstormed ahead of time, and were really interested in that mindset and that shift. So you prompted us quite well. So thank you for that. Here's the last question, and I can see if I can get it. It was from Karen North. She said, Jane, who is the village? You still have the same mindset block since we are at the White House together. So I'll let you respond to that in the 45 seconds that we have, okay, and you guys can close out.
And I'm going to share my time with Jean because I can see she really wants to say something.
So, yeah.
Village.
I'll just type it in the chat.
The village is all of you. The village are educators in computer science, but also in other subjects. The village are people that have been fighting for, around the issues of underrepresentation in computer science. The village are people that want to see equity in the society. It's a big village. It's the village is people that are working in boys and girls clubs and people that are working in the schools. All of us, we're the village. And Jean, did you want to say something? Jean.
I just
and
put
hi,
it in the
Karen.
chat.
Hi, Karen. Okay. Okay.
And Karen wants to add Microsoft Teams to support interns and in the classroom and to build on the village. So was there one last comment? That's it? All right. Well, that was, we could go on. You do know that, right? There's still much more to answer and ask in this discussion. I want to thank you on behalf of the ACM, particularly the Education Board, and Susan and I, as co-chairs of the DEI committee. We want to just thank you for your time today. It was a very insightful presentation, and you've spawned a lot of questions and definitely given us some food for thought as we move forward, particularly here with the work at the ACM as well. So thanks for coming. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you all very much. Thank you so much.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You all, that was so